so pensive.
This will be a quick guide for the Task Ninja as an automation framework that I have created for community. It's open source tool, or more I can say it's open source automation framework, and helps you to automate your daily routine tasks for your work, for your office, for anything that you want, bug bounty or anything as such. Anything that you can perform on a Linux environment, yeah, you can automate that through the various ways. Now, let's first get the installation done in our Linux environment to proceed further. You can just quickly navigate to this installation and you will have this installation option. What you have to do, you just have to enable your module. If you have the latest version of Golang, probably you just have to go for this go install, and that would be pretty much easy as that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna quick shift to the VS Code that I'll be using for this entire journey. In case I required any of the GUI things, I'm gonna move back to my VM. All right. So here for installation, it's pretty much easy. You must have Go installed. You can just quickly install it by using apt install Golang, and that's pretty easy. Apart from that, for installation of this Task Ninja, you'll require first Task Ninja to be installed. By just using this simple command, you'll be able to install it. And once you have installed this particular tool or software, the next thing that you have to do is, let's first wait for this installation and then we'll proceed further. Perfect. It's installed. Now you can just quickly navigate to your home directory, go bin and Task Ninja. This is where all your Go binary is being stored. For an example, I have installed few of the Go binaries, and those are installed in this particular location. You can add this particular location to your path environment variable in order to quickly navigate to Task Ninja. However, I'm not gonna do it just for the case. And here we go. If you just execute it, it will gonna give you the banner, the version, and whatnot. So currently, at the time of recording, this particular Golang tool, Task Ninja, has a version of 2.0.2. Now, the Task Ninja require also Docker to be installed in your Linux environment. What you can do, you can just follow any Docker installation process, and that would be pretty easy. So let me show you one. You just have to navigate to Google and search for, let's say, install Docker in whatever you have. For an example, install Docker in Ubuntu, Linux, Debian. If you are using Kali, and just type Kali, any operating system that you want. For Windows, yeah, you can just search for Docker install in whatever version. I'll just gonna search for Docker install, and here is the first link that you're gonna get. It does have the CentOS, Debian, Fedora, and whatnot. You just have to click the one and good to go. For the Windows, yeah, it has a little different way to install. Just have to navigate from here. Docker desktop for Windows. It also have for Linux. So yeah, you can just use it. For Windows, you need to enable WSL. It will gonna utilize WSL to run any Docker images or containers that you want. That's being said, let's just go for the Debian, as the Kali Linux is based on this Debian version, and yeah, we're gonna proceed. So the command is pretty much easy. You just have to navigate. You just have to execute this single line, and that's pretty easy. It also requires this particular repository things if something fails over the same, and yeah, you just have to navigate through this particular blog, and that's pretty easy. I assume that you must be aware about installation of any software that you want, especially the Docker. Once you have this Docker installed, the next thing that you have to do is you just have to check whether or not you have Docker enabled and running. The easiest way to check installation is just type Docker images ls. And if this command returns no error, then yeah, that's pretty easiest way. The next way is to just check with your services. So for an example, service Docker status. And here, what it says active and running. Sometime, not sometime, but yeah, if you just type ID and if you don't see Docker here uh, with this particular ID, then probably, yeah, you will gonna require to use the root access. Or else you can do is like you can add your user into Docker group, so you will be able to interact with the Docker, and that's the safest way. I hope that makes sense. And let's just start with our workflow and other understanding. So here, if you just scroll a little bit, you'll be able to see those two images that are good to learn and understand the structure of workflow, execution, and whatever it is. So yeah, let's just check for the very first, taking a little time. Let's identify. Wait for a moment. Hmm. Let me just refresh. That's weird. Major new tab. Anyway, I'll just zoom in a bit and that would be enough for our case. Yeah. So the first thing when you start any workflow, there are few important things for the workflows. The things are static and dynamic. Static workflows are the one that is just you define the particular command, it will gonna execute and do certain action. When it comes to dynamic, it will gonna require some additional inputs, and based on what it will gonna uh, perform some execution. And for dynamic, there are two different ways. First one is dynamic range. Second one is dynamic file. In the terms of dynamic range, it will gonna take let's say 1 to 10 counts, and it will gonna just rotates through the same. When it comes to dynamic file, it will gonna rotate through each line of the file, and it will gonna perform the same command execution while having that line updated within the command. I'll gonna explain in a bit, just have a quick idea of the same. Second, the start has some inputs. Basically, once you start, you're gonna require to have some inputs. That could be file, that could be folder, that could be HTTP request. HTTP request, you have to provide URL that is accessible from the system that you are accessing this particular, or you are executing this particular task. And yeah, it will gonna what it will gonna do, it will gonna just attach those inputs to every Docker container that it will be required. Now once you have this static and dynamic task defined, what it will gonna do for the static task, it will just gonna execute one single container, execute whatever the task is, and result will gonna be saved. When it comes to dynamic task, it will gonna check the threads count. Let's say I have specified 10 threads. So it will gonna boot up 10 different Docker images, and those Docker images, Docker containers will gonna be executed on parallel. And the result will gonna be saved in the result structure. Let's say you have a dynamic file with 10 lines, and I have specified three threads. Now, what it's gonna do, it will gonna first take 3 lines, any random 3 lines, of course. It will gonna take those 3 lines, it will gonna execute, it will gonna, once it is done, then it's gonna get the next line, next line, next line, and so on and so forth. And lastly, you just have to manually, not manually, of course, you can automate that too. You can just have all those results merged in a particular result that is gonna be saved somewhere. Now, all those tasks will gonna be creating directories in your system that are required, of course, for the execution. The first directory is, of course, input. Whatever input is, the folder that you specify. For an example, I have taken Hive as an input, and in is for the input, and for output, it will gonna be output. Of course, input and output is totally hard coded there, that is in and out, but the Hive is something that you can specify. So let's say for a particular task you want different folder to be used, for the next task you want different folder to be used, and yeah, you can do it. And the logs is optional there. If you want all the output logs, for an example, standard out and standard error, to be saved somewhere for your debugging purpose, for your reference, for anything as such, then you can just have this logs enabled. And once it is enabled, it will gonna be all good to go. So that's how the task ninja works. It starts with some input. It checks for whether it is static or dynamic task. The task will gonna be executed based on those information like static or dynamic. If it is dynamic, it's gonna check thread counts, and based on the thread count, it's gonna execute multiple Docker container. It's like splitting our work to multiple resources. And when it comes to static tasks, it's going to be just one single Docker container, and all those folders will going to be mounted to the same. For an example, input and output. So whatever you want as an input will going to be attached to the input folder, and whatever you want to be output, it will going to be in the output folder. Of course, you can chain one task output to the next one, and I'm gonna explain those later on whenever we start with the workflow executions. As we know how this particular task ninja works in the backend, let's understand what are the requirements. So for the particular task ninja to be perfectly working, you're gonna require workflows. Workflows are nothing but set of tasks that you want to be executed in a particular series, something. And yeah, you can just click on the workflow and you'll be redirected to Task Ninja workflows repository. This repository is 100% public, and this will gonna allow, if you want, let's say, contribute your own workflow, then yeah, feel free to just create a pull request, and I'll gonna happily add it to this particular uh, process, this particular repository. Sorry. Yeah. So all the in this particular workflow folder, you'll find different folder structure, discovery, recon, vulnerabilities, and whatnot. And based on what you'll be able to drop your own workflow. Let's say you want to perform subdomain discovery. It will gonna be in the discovery, or it could even be in the recon phase. You want to perform some screenshots, you want to do certain tasks one after another, then yeah, you just have to create those workflows. It's like a set of tasks, and that would be pretty much easiest. Now, to understand those workflows, it is important to understand this particular structure of YAML file. So those workflows, so let me just take one simple workflow from the vulnerability. It's let's say XSS scanner. Those are nothing but YAML file. YAML file is easy to read, easy to even configure, easy to utilize within the Golang. Yeah, it's quite easy in short. So now to understand this particular YAML structure, we will be required to understand this particular task. It is something like API documentation that you might have read somewhere for any kind of APIs, right? So now this YAML file has three different, I can say, entities. First one is the task, second one is config, and the third one is where. So if you navigate to this particular task ninja workflow, it has config that will gonna have all the basic and global configuration for this particular task ninja. It has wheres are nothing but a placeholders or a placeholder replacements that you want, and some inputs that you want to be added here. The third one is the task. What task will gonna do? It will gonna have a list. It will gonna have a list or a structure that will gonna allow you to specify your own task based on different names. For an example, here I have specified two different tasks. One is Dalfox and second one is result. That's quite simple and easy. And the third, yeah, so we saw about the variables, saw about config, and we saw about task. Let's understand one after another. And the first one is, of course, the config is the topmost. Now, config has few components. The first one is the name. Name is type of string that will gonna allow you to specify your workflow name. For an example, I want to do subdomain discovery. So subdomain discovery is the workflow name. I want to do web discovery. Web discovery would be the workflow name. You want to do port scanning. Port scanning would be the workflow name. Second one is author. Author I have specifically added here. It will gonna be just printing your name. So let's say you are a contributor, you want to create the workflow, you can just specify your name there, and that name will gonna be accessible or visible for everyone who utilize that particular workflow. Third one is the usage. So for an example, you want a specific input uh, for your particular workflow, then yeah, you can just use this particular usage as a global component. You can specify the command line that you want, and when that input is not provided, that is within the variables, then it will gonna be just asking that, hey, you have to do this particular usage. It will gonna just print out the usage. For an example here, the usage is specified task ninja hyphen workflow name is access scanner.yaml, and hyphen v is the variable that you want to be supplied here, variable value. I want URL list that is specified within the var structure, and that URL list you can just specify here. I hope that makes sense to you. Now, if this URL is not specified, if this variable is not specified, then this will going to print this particular line. So that's being said, let's just navigate back to structure. The next here is the shell. Shell is basically you just have to specify whether you want bash or sh as a default shell. Next is default image. As it utilizes a Docker container, then yeah, you just have to specify which default container you want to be used. For an example, the by default that is Alpine. Yeah, if you have any other default image that you want that is created for your own purpose, for an example, a single Docker image that has multiple tools that you require, you can just use it as a default. Next is Hive, is the folder where you want all your data to be saved. For an example here, the Hive, it is not mentioned. If it is not mentioned here, then default would be Hive, as you see here. And if you want something different, for an example, this is specific for the XSS scan, I can create one new config here that is with the Hive, and then I can rename it to something like XSS. So it will gonna create that folder, and inside that folder, based on different task name, it will gonna create subfolders and do whatever the required things are. The last one is the logs that will gonna that is like a boolean. You just have to enable or disable it. So if the log is enabled, then yeah, it will gonna create those logging directory that I have explained in the past. So this is how those are the components of config structure for the YAML. Now, the next component that I want to highlight here is the task. So let me just scroll a bit. We go. Task has huge list, of course, but most of them are optional. You're not gonna require that to be specified as such. So let's go one after another. The first one here is the name. What we're gonna do, it will gonna be a name for the task, and that must be unique for all. So let's say you want to start with nmap. The first name would be, let's say, nmap. Second, you want to parse that nmap. So the next name should not be, or must not be nmap. It has to be different. For an example, once nmap is done, then you want to parse nmap result. So the nmap parser or something, anything that you want. Even you can specify nmap -1, nmap -2, whatever you want, right? But it should not be identical to the next. All the names would be or must be different for your task. Second one is image. The Docker image that you want to be used, that is again optional, not something that you have to specify. And yeah, for an example, I want to perform HTTPX as a tool. So I'm not going to use the default image. I want to use HTTPX image from Project Discovery. And that is what I'm going to be using. So for this, I want Dalfox to be executed. So I've created Dalfox image that is going to be executing Dalfox with whatever input that I want to specify. And this is how it works. The image I have specified as this. Dalfox. Rebensive is open repository for your docker.io, and it will gonna have all the different images that are created for the task ninja. So you can navigate that too later. The next one here is command. What we're gonna do, it will gonna be a list or list of strings that will gonna have list of commands to be executed within Docker. And you have to make sure that those commands will gonna be connected to each other with end. End is a way to execute one command and the next together. So yeah, those commands will gonna be merged together and executed all together. This is how it works. You can specify list of command that you want, and that's how it works. The next one here is the silent. Silent is a boolean type of input that will gonna be when it is enabled, you're gonna see the logs on the screen. It could be standard out, it could be standard error, anything or everything. It will gonna just display it there. When it comes to parallel means it will gonna keep your particular task running in a background. So let's say you want to perform 2 or 3 different tasks together, and you want those to be in the background. So yeah, you can just enable this parallel, and it will gonna run through the parallel. But the time that you want a particular task to be uh, completed, then this parallel must be false. Next one here is the required. Required is the task that you want to be required to finish before executing the current. For an example, let's say this result currently it does not have that specified, because yeah, the parallel is false here. But when it comes to parallel through, when you want to double sure about the next, let's say result should not be executed before the fox is finished, then you can have this parallel sorry, not the parallel, you can have this required specified there, required with the fox as a name. So you can check other examples. This is the easiest one and the smallest one to understand. So yeah, we are done with the required. The next one here is the timeout. So for a particular task, you want certain timeout. Let's say I want to check if this particular task can be done within, let's say, 10 second, 20 second, 10 minutes, 10 hours or something. Then you can specify. By default, each task will gonna take 1 day. If it is more than 1 day, then probably your task is broken and you must improvise your workflow structure. So for that reason, by default, it is set to 1 day. Stop an error, it will gonna stop the execution at the time if it caught any error. Note that the error might not be from the Docker program. The error would be from the Docker container. For an example, a Docker container failed to get the log, Docker container failed to boot up, or anything as such that failed. And yeah, it will gonna show you this error that yeah, something is wrong. You need to just double check. Okay. The next here is the type of particular task. As I mentioned earlier, there are two types: dynamic and static. So you can just specify either dynamic or static. By default, it is static if you don't specify dynamic. However, if you specify the other two mentioned, that is dynamic file or dynamic range, it will automatically enable this type. So it is totally optional that you want or not. But yeah, you can either specify, you can either skip it. That's the same. Dynamic file, as I mentioned, it will gonna rotates through every line of the file that you specify here. Dynamic range will gonna be rotate through every count that you want to be rotated. And there are placeholders, that is dynamic range and dynamic file, that will gonna be replaced with that particular structure. For an example, if you see here, the URL next to URL dynamic file is a placeholder within the curly braces. Now this will gonna be replaced with each line mentioned within this particular dynamic file. And what it's gonna do, it will gonna take the URL list, and the URL list is being supplied here. So all those variables can be replaced within the code, not anywhere, but yeah, in certain location like dynamic file or input or commands, whatnot. So those can be replaced over the same. Now this will gonna be replaced with this with the path that you specified. It will gonna rotate through each line, and each line will gonna be passed on here and executed five parallel Docker containers. If you have probably the higher configuration system, then yeah, you can change it to 15, 20 and whatnot. That's being said, let's move to the next, that is threads. And yeah, number of concurrent container to be used for your dynamic task. and for that you have the threads. For mounts, let's suppose that you have two tasks. First one is this, second one is result. So you can use mount in order to supply all the output of this delphox. So let's say I want delphox output to be used again in the next container. So this result will gonna be having mount of delphox as a name, and there is a placeholder with 3 curly braces as a file and folder. When it comes to file, it will gonna get hive out and output.txt, but as it is dynamic task, it will gonna be it will gonna be just a folder, and if I just supply file, it will gonna be void. So yeah, because it will gonna be running parallel one and another. I'll explain in a bit when we comes to towards the practical approach, and that will gonna be make more sense. That's being said, what we're gonna do, it will gonna just use that placeholder to automatically navigate to that particular folder. It will gonna get, as you see, start all the concurrent execution output will be saved in out and output.txt file, will gonna be passed through this jq or jquery, and it will gonna be exported to the csv file. The result will gonna be event displayed here. Right? Perfect. So the amounts will gonna allow you to have certain task output to be supplied to the next, and it'll gonna just copy every files or folders that particular task output folder has. It will gonna be passed on to the next. Next here is the input. Input is a spatial, not a spatial, but yeah, input is another option that allows you to supply few types of files. For an example, you want input. I think I have used now in this particular I haven't used. So let me check the next. So you're gonna get some ideas. Have input here. Here. So for an example, here input, it has list. List is nothing but the supplied value here with the variable. The variable is empty. When it is empty, it will gonna ask user to supply some value. And here list is nothing but input for this particular file and with the name of input.txt. So it will automatically passed on to Hive. Hive is nothing but Hive input, current task input, and it will gonna be input.txt. By just supplying this comma, you can rename that file. So for an example, I can even supply URL of the file that it will gonna be automatically downloaded. Make sure that you don't have any network issues. But yeah, it will gonna automatically download it, and input.txt will gonna be the final name of it. Same if you specify the internal file, then yeah, it will gonna be. But yeah, for folder, it will not gonna be renaming anything as such. So you have to make sure when it comes to folder, you just have to supply folder, and that's it. That's being said, those are the components for all the tasks. And the next thing here is the placeholders. Those placeholders, of course, are hard coded. Placeholder that you see here, those are the hard coded. Other than that, you can define your own placeholders. And placeholders can be can be replaced by just using this curly braces twice. There are special cases when it comes to getting file and folder output through this 3 curly braces. For the file, this must be folder. There's some typos, but yeah, for the file it will gonna be just a file. For folder it will gonna be folder. I'll gonna fix it and update this particular image later. No worries. So yeah, for this particular hive, it is nothing but the Docker hive that you have used. So if any of the command you want your Docker hive to be used, you can use this hive placeholder. Hive in will gonna be hive input folder. Hive output will be output folder. Host hive would be your current machine, not the Docker inside Docker mounted file folder. It will gonna be current folder. Host hive. Host hive output current machine means, let's say I'm executing in the Kali, then yeah, host would be the Kali machine. Kali machine hive folder, Kali machine output folder, Kali machine input folder. Dynamic file is the replacement for the file lines that you want to be replaced. Dynamic range would be number that you want to be replaced from the specified range. task name file, and folder is the mounted file and folders that we want to be passed on. So that is how the Task Ninja YAML works. I hope that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, no worries, just wait for some time. I'm gonna give you and guide you for each and every component of the same practically. So that's being said, see you next time.